The death of a parent is always a blow. But when financial disaster comes instead of mourning, you breathe not through tears but through rage. A George woke up in the 59th spring of his life, and the first thing he did was not wash his face, but wipe the snow off his mailbox. A letter. A brown envelope from a stationery company he didn't recognize. It smelled of officialdom and trouble. Inside, it was short and drig. Dear Mr. Banks, we regret to inform you of the death of your parents, Edward and Grace Banks. We invite you to read the will in the presence of Notary Jolin Myers. A. It wasn't that George didn't love his parents. It was just that there was a whole country of silence between them, and now it was over. But the inheritance, it had to be something. A house, maybe a bank account, and 35 years of marriage should have left something. An office in downtown Seattle. Glass doors, a little sterility, a little cheap perfume on the receptionist. Joylin was a woman in her 60s, wearing glasses that looked more expensive than her dress. She wasn't smiling. So, Mr. Banks, the inheritance. She flipped through the papers with a face like she was reading a verdict. Your parents left you all their property. But, he stopped at that, but like a slippery slope. The property is encumbered by debt, she said, as if she were reading a prescription. Over $140,000. In debentures, mortgages, promissory notes. George smiled. But not with joy. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when the mind breaks down. What debt? Your parents took out loans, lots of them. Some of it is in your name. He felt as if he had suddenly fallen through the chair. The silence in the room began to buzz. Like an old TV when there's no signal. It's some kind of mistake. They were careful with the money. My father is a teacher. My mother is a nurse. They could, Mr. Banks, we have the documentures, bank statements. Here, she handed him a folder. George's fingers shook. He recognized the handwriting, his own. His mother's, Ada, but the documents had his name on them. He walked out of the office like a drunk. His legs did not obey him. It was raining outside. Not the refreshing kind. The kind that makes you look for a roof, even if nothing protects you anymore. He stood, clutching the folder to his chest, and thought, Mom, what have you done? Suddenly, he saw his mother writing something at the kitchen table, asking him not to disturb her. George was still a teenager at the time. She said, this is for your future, George. Maybe it was duty, family, money, trust. How much of it is real? What's just an appearance? That evening he received a call from a man. Is this Mr. Banks? Your deadhead has been purchased by our company. We want to negotiate a restructuring. He hung up. And then he got another call. And another. And with each one louder and louder, your life is no longer yours. It is now our debt. George decided to dig. He could not believe that everything was true. That his mom and dad, whom he had looked up to as role models, were deceivers. He didn't know that the next morning a man would knock on his door and say, Are you looking for the truth, Mr. Banks? Then you need to know who David Larson is. And the envelope that reappeared in his mailbox the next day contained only one sentence, typed on an old typewriter. They left you nothing but lies. We all dream of an inheritance. But there is one caveat. Sometimes what is supposed to be a support becomes an anchor. The next morning, George was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking cold coffee, not noticing how it was dripping from his spoon. In front of him was the same folder from the notary's office. He looked at it as if it were a living thing. Like an enemy, the phone was silent, but there was a hum in his head. Like the noise of the road when you don't know which way to go. There was a knock at the door. He was not expecting anyone. He opened it and a thin man in a suit that had seen better days stood on the threshold. Mr. Banks. He said, his voice a little hoarse, with a cigarette undertone. I used to work with your father. We need to talk. Who are you? Your father trusted me with something important. And I think it's time you knew about it. Unless you're afraid of the truth. They were sitting in a cheap cafe. David ordered tea, no sugar, no milk. George ordered nothing. His hunger had long since burned away under the degree of distrust. Elua, your father was in a difficult situation. His back was against the wall. Literally. He got involved with people he shouldn't have trusted with a cent. You mean loans? I mean bets. And not just on horses. George felt something click in his head. You mean my father. Gambled. Not just gambled. He gambled as if he were trying to escape his life. And he was losing. But the worst part was, he was betting everything, including his future. George leaned back. And Mom, she covered for him. Signed the papers, she arranged the loans, told the banks the money was for your education, to fix up the house. She lied better than actors in Hollywood. But she did it out of love. Stupid, blind love. George remembered his mother always saying, your dad is just tired. He's not a bad man. Life just broke him a little bit. At the time, it seemed like a concern, and now complicity. David pulled another folder from his bag. There's something the notary didn't tell you. The last will and testament, they made a gift before they died. A gift. Yes. To your son, to Ben, a house in his name with the condition that his parents live there for life. My son, he's 12. They how? Why? To hide an asset, so they don't take it all away. But the bank already knows. And lawyers are looking into it. If you can't prove that you weren't in on the conspiracy, you'll lose everything, and maybe even get a case in court. George felt the ground cracking under his feet. The house is a gift. And with debts, at Arrow AA, what is this, a trap? It's an inheritance, Mr. Banks. It's wrapped in gift wrapping, but it's full of downsides. George walked down the street. He passed people smiling, drinking coffee, taking their children to school. And he felt empty. He wanted to scream. You are left not with your life, but with a chessboard where you have long been beaten. And they said thank you. The phone rang again. Mr. Banks, we represent Morton Brady. Your father owes him $37,000. We want it back, or what? Or we're going to have to take a different tone. And not on the phone. That night, George couldn't sleep. In the morning, he saw that the mail had brought a new letter. This time, it had no return address. Inside was a photo. It was his father, his mother, and a man George had never met. The caption under the photo, "This is not your father." She believed that love is when you don't ask, you just pay. But what if you pay with your life? After the letter with the photo, George spent the whole night at the computer. He was looking for the face in that photo, and he was looking for logic. At least some kind of hook to the past. Instead of answers, he came across something else, copies of bank documents. Credit card statements. The owner's name was Nora Banks. His mom. There were purchases he couldn't explain. He couldn't imagine her making them. For example, a laptop for $2,500, even though she didn't even know how to turn on an old microwave. 2 bills at furniture stores. Payments for hotels in cities she had never visited. The next day, he went to the bank as if it were a funeral. I need information about my mother's credit cards, he said, trying to sound firm, I'm sorry, but without a power of attorney. She's dead, George interrupted, and I'm her son. And the only here, after some delays, he was finally given a printout. The total debt, $52,000, he and a 25 of which had been incurred in the last 2 years of her life. He recalled how she asked him not to worry about medical expenses. It's okay, son, your dad and I can handle it. And indeed she was. With credit cards, with overdrafts and lies. Your mom was gold, said Mrs. Levy, the neighbor on the left. I don't know how she stood it. Your father was no puppy. You mean his debts. The woman looked away. His hands. He could be rough. Both when he drank and when he lost. George found a tape in an old closet. A small one, a tape recorder. And next to it was the recorder itself. There was one single recorded track inside. If you're listening to this, it means I couldn't keep quiet any longer. His mother's voice began. I wanted to protect you both, you from shame, and him from prison. But love is not silence. It's the truth that we don't dare say. George listened to his mother's voice, and in every word there was a new piece of shrapnel. And Noah, she talked about how she got him out of debt, how she signed other people's loans because it was necessary, because he was nervous. I'm his wife. And also about the man she loved before she met her father, the Anna and who might have been his real father. I met him only twice after the wedding. Once 6 months after you were born, I'm not sure, but maybe that's why you were always different, softer, kinder. That evening George sat on the living room floor amidst a pile of old bills and photographs. You were a hero, Mom, he whispered. Silence is like an answer. The phone rang. Is this Mr. Banks? Yes. Your father had another line of credit. It was in the name of Nora Banks. It was secured by jewelry and the family safe. We're going to need you to come down to the bank to verify the details. What safe? It's in the bank's safe deposit box in New Haven. But we never had a safe. Maybe you just didn't know about it. Before George could hang up, there was a knock at the door. Again, and again, a stranger. This time it was a woman in her 60s with a sad look and a clear phrasing. I knew your mother. And I have her true cherished word for you. What if the person closest to you is just a legend, a fiction to cover up other people's crimes? I knew your mother, the woman said, holding an envelope clutched as if it were her last hope. And I know who Uncle Sam is, the one she mentioned in her will. George went quiet. We didn't have an Uncle Sam. Now that's right, she nodded. But there was a Samuel Rose, and he may be your last hope. The woman called herself Carolyn. She was once a nurse, then Nora's friend. They met at a clinic for mentally exhausted relatives of patients. And yes, there is such a place. Nora came there twice a week. She trusted me more than she trusted herself. But once she said, if I don't live to see my son search for the truth, give him this. She held out an envelope, and inside was an old, yellowed postcard with a picture of little George cut out of a family photo. And the inscription, my sonny boy. I'm sorry that the world was darker than I dreamed, and a copy of his birth certificate. But, with a different father, Samuel Rose. This is a mistake, George muttered. My father is Stanley Banks. He raised me. He did. But he didn't create you, Carolyn said softly. Nora had a brief affair a few months before the wedding. It was her rebellion. And your appearance is the result of that rebellion. George found an address in his mother's old notes, Chi, Wyoming, P.O. Box 151. He wrote a letter, without hope, just to put his doubts to rest. 6 days later, an envelope arrived. It was handwritten, on a new without computer markings. Inside was a letter on yellowed paper. I knew this day would come. But I didn't know it would hurt so much. I can't be what you want me to be. But I can say one thing, I loved your mom. And I left her everything I had. She put it in the safe. She was afraid Stanley would destroy it. Look for the safe. The truth is in there. George called the bank in New Haven. After much verification, confirmation, and documentation, he was finally granted access to the family deposit. Inside was a velvet box with 3 things. The first was a letter from Sam to Nora, full of tenderness, fear, and a promise that one day their boy will know the truth. The second was a gold chain with a medallion. Inside is a photo of George, cut out of the same family portrait. The third is a savings book with an account for $150,000. In the column, account holder, is a name. She was saving this for me, George whispered, and the tears came on their own, and she made me a pillow. At the last moment. It didn't take away the pain, but it gave me a reference point. But the joy was short-lived. The next morning, the lawyer called. We have a problem, Mr. Banks, or Rose. Your mother named you as an heir in her will, but your father, Stanley, disputed it before she died. But he's dead, George muttered, and that's why the court has ordered an audit of the estate. You temporarily have no access to these funds. And then another call came through. A woman's voice, a little hoarse, a little drunken. Are you George? I'm your half-sister. and I think we have something to talk about. What if everything you called home never belonged to you, not even according to the documents? Half. The voice on the phone sounded confident, as if she'd been practicing this phrase for 10 years. I'm Sam's daughter, and I'm here because you can take what's mine. Maisie showed up on Nora's porch 48 hours later. Blonde hair, hard eyes, and the faint smell of expensive cigarettes. It's a nice house, she said, looking around. But it's not yours. It's my parents' house, George grumbled. It's my mother's house, she replied. Everything is in his name, and now, as his only legal heir, I have the right to sue. Or we can make a deal. What do you want? George asked. Half of the deposit you took out of the safe, and I'm staying out of the house. And if I refuse, then you'll lose everything. You don't have the deed to the house. I do. I've already talked to lawyers. Yours, by the way. That night, George found another folder among his mother's belongings. Inside were old letters, drafts of contracts, and something more, Sam's unregistered, handwritten will, which mentioned 2 children. And one phrase that burned Georging. Everything I've earned is for George because he didn't ask to be born. And Maisie. She can fend for herself. This could be a trump card, said the lawyer, but only if the handwriting is confirmed by an expert, and if the will is considered valid. It wasn't notarized. And the house. Maisie has the right to sue if she can prove it belonged to her father. You lived there, but legally. It's a gray area. For the first time in a long time, George wasn't angry. He felt tired. The house where he grew up. The walls that had heard his first cries, his first quarrels, his first plans for the future suddenly became alien. I slept on this couch when I was heartbroken, he said to himself. I sat here with my mom when she didn't recognize me for the first time. And now some woman from Los Angeles can throw me out the door. He found another envelope among the boxes. The handwriting was his mother's. George, if you're reading this, everything is already ruined. But know that I didn't want you to live in fear or debt. The house was signed over to Sam because I didn't trust Stanley at the time. And Sam promised to give it all back to you. I kept another copy of the deed in my secret place. You just have to remember where I used to hide the Christmas presents. George turned the whole house upside down. But he found the same place. Only on the 3rd day, an old drawer in the pantry, covered with Christmas decorations and a broken toaster. There was a burnt edge of parchment with text still visible, a deed of gift of the house. The signature Samuel Rose. Recipient George Banks, with a bitter aftertaste egg. If this document is genuine, the lawyer said, Maisie will get nothing from the house. But that means war, a trial, money, time, and, most importantly, more pain. She's my sister, George said, looking out the window, but I don't know who I am anymore. And what kind of home is this if there is no peace in it? That night, just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, George heard a knock at the door. You have an hour to pack, said the woman from the bank. There's another case at the house. It turns out your mother mortgaged it, 6 months before she died. Just because your neighbor smiles, helps you out, and brings you pumpkin pie doesn't mean he's not watching you. He lived next door for over 20 years. Roy McMillan is must a child, talkative, and always with a patch of tomatoes. George had known him since childhood. Roy had one thing going for him: he was always on time. 2 on time. I hear you're getting evicted, he once said, holding a newspaper in his hands. That's a tough one. And your mom, she always said the worst thing is to lose your trust. Roy, how do you know that? George asked. Someone heard it. Someone told it. I also saw your windows lit up until almost 3 in the morning. Are you following me? I just don't sleep well. I'm old. The next day, George went through another box of his mother's things. He found a photo of an old party in the backyard. He is about 10 years old. His mother is laughing, holding a cake. Roy is next to her, but not with a mustache, and a caption on the back. Ed and Nora, summer of '95. Ed. Have you ever been under a different name? George asked the next time he met Roy at the fence. People sometimes change their names when they want to leave behind mistakes, or when they don't want to be found. Is that you, boy? An old mailman named Chuck, who had been working in the neighborhood for almost 40 years, happened to remember, George. This Roy. Came about a year after Sam left town. And before that, I used to get letters addressed to Ed McCrae in the same house that Roy now owns. It's a strange thing. George went to the local library. He looked through the yellowed newspapers until he came across an article from 20 years ago. Local businessman Ed McCrae is the subject of a real estate fraud investigation. Disappeared without a trace after interrogation. The photo is the same face, only younger. Ed McCrae, also known as Roy McMillan, was a front man in schemes involving fake real estate documents. After the investigation, he disappeared and reappeared as an eternal neighbor and family friend. Among Nora's letters is a red envelope. It is neatly signed, "For you if I'm gone." Inside is a photograph. She and Ed, they are embracing. On the back, "You were my peace of mind when everything was going to hell." "You're kidding," George muttered. "You've been lying to me my whole life," George said, catching Roy in the yard. "I lied to survive. Did you love my mom?" "I did, but she chose fear over me, because if anyone found out about me, you would have grown up without her." "What else are you hiding?" "Maybe. I know where the money went, and who was the real owner of those accounts you're looking for. But I'll tell you one thing, your mother wasn't as naive as you think she was. If you want to know the truth, George, a woman from Boston is coming tomorrow, and she was involved with your father. And she's bringing a copy of a letter that will change everything. Most people think of notebooks as just paper, but sometimes one notebook can wait more than a lifetime." George was awake. It was raining outside. Water was dripping from the roof of the old house, as if to remind him that time was passing and there were no more answers. He and the rhythm of the drops. He remembered the old basement, where no one had been down for years. His mother had always said, "There's nothing interesting down there." But it seemed she was lying about a lot of things. The basement stairs were slippery. George went down with a flashlight in his hand. The air was damp, smelling of old books, mold, and fear. There was a box next to an old shelf. It looked ordinary. Inside were school notebooks, a few records, a faded calendar for the year 1983, and one thick notebook wrapped in brown paper. "Diary, for myself only," was written on the first page. It was his mother's notebook, but not a diary, rather a chronicle. George couldn't put it down. She wrote about her fear of banks, about the debts that disappeared. Who was he? Her father. Or the man she really loved? And a one-paragraph broke Georgie. "I had a choice. Either marry Sam, stability, peace, but cold, or stay with Ed. But then we could both go to jail. I chose George. But sometimes I think I lost myself." The records were organized by month. Individual expenses, hidden accounts, codes. Letters and numbers that at first glance had no meaning, but in context made it clear that she didn't just know about the debts, she was part of the scheme. "Mom, George whispered, turning the pages. "You weren't just a victim." One page had a signature that was not in her handwriting. "Nora, if this burns, we're both free. But if it survives, I'm ready to face the consequences." The same day the woman called. Her voice was dry calm with a Boston accent. "Are you George? My name is Irene Barton. I was your father's accountant. Now everything will come together. If you're ready to listen." Irene arrived with a yellow folder. She looked like a history teacher, neat, reserved, with eyes that seemed to have seen too much. But he wasn't exactly a bastard. He was forced. By whom? That's what you have to find out. But one of the schemes involved your mother. She didn't sign the documents, but she handed over the keys. She was saving her family. By committing a crime. Irene pulls out a card, an old blueprint of a safe deposit box in New York. "There's something in here that belongs to you. but it will only open with 2 signatures, and one of them is the man who lives next door to you, now known as Roy. A George stands in front of Roy's door. His head is buzzing. He doesn't want to open those boxes anymore. But if it's true, he will know who his father really was, and whether his mother was a victim or an accomplice. Roy, we need to talk. Did you find the notebook? Yes. Then it's time to go to New York. There's more in the box than just money. There's documents, film, and another letter. And it begins with the word so. If you're reading this, then things are out of control. We all dream of an inheritance. But what if it exists only on paper, without names, without coordinates, without truth? Only a shadow and a hint that you are a guest in this story, not an heir. New York seemed too noisy to George after he opened the bank box. There was no money there. There were no diamonds. Only a copy of the will, and a letter that began with the words, "My life ended long ago. What remains is a debt. You decide for yourself whether you want to accept it." The will was handwritten, but there was no address, no name. Only initial so's, E.T., I, and 3 Linus. I leave everything I have to the person who found this document. If he knows where to look, then he is ready to accept the truth. Is this a joke? George asked Roy. No, it was your father's style. He believed that only those who go the whole way can avoid being burned by what they find. The lawyer George turned his shoulders. Legally, it's almost nothing. No names, no notary, no registration. But if someone from the family recognizes the document, the case can move forward. And if the family is no longer there, then it's more complicated. But there have been miracles in our practice. In the envelope, besides the will, there was one more thing, a small worn leather map book. Inside was a map with a label, a small town in Iowa, and the words, "Where it smells like apples and sulfur." Does that matter? No. George looked at Roy. Yes, it's where your mother wanted to get away and where it all began. Iowa greeted them with damp air and silent faces. There was nothing in the town of Granford except an old fruit factory that had been closed since the early 20s. In the library, George found a newspaper clipping. A fraudulent scheme involving fictitious contracts has been uncovered. Ottawa, a shell company registered in the name of Edward Trenner. E.T. He whispered, "It's him." At the bus stop, an old man sat down with George. "If you're looking for Ed, he's not waiting for anyone." But he left something in the basement. In the basement of what? In the factory. The stairs under the north wall. That was his office. But now it's something else. Dust and silence. Water dripping from the ceiling. George shines a flashlight into the darkness, and suddenly he sees a safe. There is a combination lock on it. Next to it is an old typewriter with a single line of paper on it. 3 digits the year we broke up. George remembered. His mother always wore a pendant with the date on it, 985. The year disappeared. When her eyes became different, he dialed 855. The safe clicked. There was no money. But there were photos. The mother and the same man, Ed. Young, in love. And another document, another will. With date seals. Legitimate. But it was not in George's name. It was in another person's name, a girl named Sarah Ann Rose. "Who is she?" George whispered. "Your sister," Rod replied. "She lived with him. And she's still alive." George is on the verge of another truth. All the debts he thought he had may not be his. And the inheritance he was looking for is not his. But does that mean he has no right to know the truth? He takes a photo of the girl. On the back is an inscription. Sarah. Utah. Don't come looking for me if you're not ready to hear about your mom, though she has disappeared from his life, leaving a postcard and a promise that it's for the best. But when the chance comes to ask, why? Silence is no longer an option. George couldn't decide for a long time. Yuta is not exactly the way to go for coffee. It was like an inner pilgrimage. It was like stepping into a mirror that had been covered in fear for years. There was something familiar in Sarah's photo. Her mom's eyes. A look that seems to be older than her age. And the caption, "Don't look for me if you're not ready to hear about your mom." He was ready. At least he thought he was. Emma, the house on the outskirts of Salt Lake City, looked simple, like a wooden porch, colorful flowers in plastic pots, a dog behind a chain-link fence. George clutched the photo in his fingers like a talisman. "You're Sarah." He pressed the doorbell. "I've been waiting for you. But I didn't know if you'd have the courage." She invited him into the kitchen. The tables were laid with embroidered napkins and tea was steaming on the stove. "It's my mother's recipe," she said. "It calms me down. Prefer something stronger. It won't help." She pulled out an old box. Inside were letters, a photo, and a cassette. Her voice. He cassette recorder weird. "If you're listening to this, it means I'm not around anymore. And you must be either my son or my daughter. I don't know which one of you will dare. But I have to say something. Anything." "She knew we'd be found," George whispered. "She was afraid of it, but she left it up to us. We're different, George. She couldn't be a mom to both of us. Life pushed her away. Your father pushed her out. But mine wasn't an angel either. Did she leave you or take you? Both. She ran away, and she saved you. And she betrayed me, all at the same time." In a letter that was tucked into the diary, George read, "I ruined 2 lives. Ava, because I didn't know where the pain ended and the habit began. George, I was afraid you would grow up to be like your father. That's why I never came back. Sarah, I was never meant to be your mother, but you were the only one who accepted me without question. I talked to her often," Sarah said. "In my mind. In her old sweater. Does she answer?" "Yes. Sometimes in silence, and I've never heard her voice. Only this, a whisper from the tape. Or is that enough for you? George, we can search for the truth all we want. But it doesn't exist in one version. It's different for everyone. But I need to know why she left me in debt, or why she didn't warn me." Sarah took out the last letter. "I don't have much left. If my son finds this, he should know that I'm sorry. There was just no way out in that system. I signed a loan secured by his future, thinking that I would be able to pay it off by the time he came of age. But the world is different. You can file a lawsuit against a bank, a fund, a credit organization. Or you can fight for the rest of your life. Or you can leave it at that. And what did you do? I burned my letter. But I kept the tape, because the voice is all that's left of the real thing." In the evening, they sat on the porch. The dog slept next to them. The silence of Utah was different from the silence of New York. Here it breathed. "Are you leaving?" Sarah asked. "Not yet. I want to listen to her be quiet again." "Then have another tea. This one is thyme, for those who stayed behind, when they took everything you had." What was left? Resentment, a thirst for revenge, or maybe finally free air that doesn't smell like debt and other people's expectations. George left Sarah's house at dawn. Anna the dog was still sleeping, and the tea on the stove had cooled down. He wanted to be quiet, but his thoughts were as noisy as a defrosted radio. The note in his mother's sweater pocket was haunting him. "If you find peace, give half to the one who comes after you." He didn't know who that after was yet. But he felt that he did not need to search anymore. He just needed to listen. The plane to New York was in the morning. The last look at Utah was like a grave where something died and something was born. Not my mom, him, maybe silence. "There is an envelope in my pocket. It contains documents. All debts have been officially transferred to him. No one asked for it. It just happened. His apartment is no longer his. The court seized it. His pension account is empty. His car was sold by the bank. He was left with a smartphone and an old jacket. But there was something else. Are you George?" A voice from behind him, a young woman, short hair, a clear posture. She was holding a letter. "This is for you." She said, "if you ever come back to give it to me." She's who?" Your mother, but I called her Linda. She was my mentor. And a little more, George. If you're reading this, you found your way. I'm not proud of what I'm leaving you. But you should know that I was not only your mom. I was someone who taught others to live without fear. I asked God for forgiveness. But not from you, because you are my forgiveness. She was strong, said the woman named Alex. Akar, but terribly lonely. Was she free? In her head, yes, not in real life, but at the end she started laughing. For the first time in a long time, George smiled too, not with joy. He smiled with understanding. He was sitting in a nightclub, a cheap burger, coffee with sugar. Old people were playing dominoes nearby. The TV was showing the news, stock exchanges were falling, presidential candidates were arguing, and there were more fires in the West. And he was a nobody. No status, no debts, no inheritance, but also without shackles. For once, I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. Hi, it's Sarah. I've been thinking. And maybe you shouldn't stay there after all. Come back again. We have a spare room and an old typewriter. Someone should write this story. He didn't answer right away. He reached for a burger. He looked at the TV, then at himself in the glass of the shop window, and suddenly realized that he had never had a choice. And now he does. If you have nothing left, take this as a gift. You are free not because you have been given. You are free because they don't hold you anymore. The train to Utah did not stop at the stations he remembered from his childhood. Everything was different now. He had no suitcases. Only an old backpack and photos that no longer hurt. And the same voice sounded in his head. Don't look for answers. Look for peace. Ago, dear friends, if you watched and felt something, sadness, hope, anger, or tenderness, please subscribe. Because the next story is already breathing down your neck, and it will be even closer. Thank you for being here.